They say babies come into the world with nothing. But one boy in Furnace Bluff came with something clenched tight in his fist. A bullet older than his mother's sorrow. A bullet that doesn't just tell a story, it finishes one. Stay with me till the end, because this isn't just about birth or death. It's about what's buried between them, and what a baby came to remind us all. I've delivered babies in blizzards, in barns, even once during a bar brawl when the mother went into labor behind a saloon curtain. But nothing prepared me for what happened last week, just outside of Furnace Bluff, in a one-room shack at the edge of Burnt Willow Canyon. Her name was Ruthie, pale as snow, quiet as shadow. She gave no last name, just handed over the signed county midwife ledger and laid down on the cot, already in labor. The name on the form was Anna Green. I didn't press dot. The baby came slowly. She didn't scream or moan, just gritted her teeth and bore down like a woman who'd already learned how to survive pain. And when he came, slick with blood, squalling as the wind howled outside, I saw his hand. His tiny, wrinkled fist was clenched, tight. I thought maybe it was a reflex, or the cord had wrapped oddly. But no, when I opened his hand, I felt my stomach drop. A bullet, an old one, heavy, misshapen, with a strange groove carved into the casing like someone had scratched it with a blade, a marking, a maker's stamp. Ruthie didn't flinch. She reached out, took the baby from me, and held him close. Never once looking at the bullet, I wrapped it in gauze and slipped it into my pocket, heart racing. I'd seen strange things before, breech births, stillborns with teeth, twins with one cry, but this was different. The boy's eyes were wide open, clear blue, too focused for a newborn. He didn't cry again, just stared at me. I left quietly an hour later as the snow began to fall. I didn't ask who the father was, didn't ask why the wood stove had already been burning when I arrived, though the air smelled like dust. But I knew two things before I even got back to town. That bullet had a story, and the baby wasn't the start of it, he was the end. I didn't sleep that night. The bullet sat on my kitchen table, wrapped in gauze, lit by the yellow glow of my oil lamp. I couldn't stop looking at it. The shape was wrong. The weight felt personal. It wasn't rusted, just aged, like it had waited for someone. In the morning, I rode into town and took it to the only man I trusted with metal older than me, Beryl Cole. He's pushing 80 and hasn't made a new gun in 15 years. But he still sharpens blades and rebalances revolvers for folks too proud to buy new. He also remembers things most people pretend they've forgotten. When I placed the bullet on his bench, he didn't touch it right away. He leaned close, squinted, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a magnifier. The silence stretched finally. He looked up at me. "Where'd you get this?" "I can't say," I told him. He grunted. "You ever hear of cold-rolled lead with a groove cut by hand?" "No, I have," he said, once. He picked it up, rolling it between his fingers like it was glass. Custom load, too heavy for hunting, too soft for war. But the groove, see that? He pointed to the faint diagonal mark near the base. That was mine. I did that, long time ago. "For who?" Barrow didn't answer right away. His voice dropped. "Gerald Brandt." I felt my heart skip. "Sheriff Brandt." He nodded. "Was just a deputy back then. Wanted a slug for personal matters," he said. "Paid extra for silence." I made 3 of M. 1 to test, 1 to keep, 1 he took. My voice came out barely a whisper. "When was this?" "Spring of 1851. I did the math in my head, 30 years ago. The same year Silas Rourke was found dead on his porch, shot once through the chest. Case closed quietly. No suspect, no motive. I tucked the bullet back into my pocket and stood. Eyes narrowed. "You planning on digging this up, Ivy?" I paused at the door. "I think it already dug itself up," I said, and as I stepped into the cold, I swore I heard something behind me, not a voice, a cradle, rocking. I returned to the shack on the edge of Burnt Willow Canyon the next morning. The snow had crusted over in sharp layers, and the wind cut through my coat like paper. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe a runaway mother, maybe a vanished cabin, but Ruthie was still there, sitting by the window, rocking the baby in her arms. She didn't look up when I entered. "Did you come to check his weight?" she asked softly. "No, I came to ask a question." She looked at me then, Her eyes were dark, not hollow, but carved. She was young, maybe 20, but her expression had the stillness of someone who'd been waiting far longer. I pulled the bullet from my coat and unwrapped it on the table. "I know what this is now," I said, "and who it belonged to." She didn't flinch, didn't blink. "You put it in his hand," I continued. "During labor, before he crowned." "That wasn't chance. It was a message." Still silence. I walked closer. "You're not Anna Green. You're Ruthie Rourke, daughter of Silas Rourke. He was murdered 30 years ago, shot with this exact slug. And you're the only living soul who could tie him to Sheriff Brandt." Her jaw tightened. She adjusted the blanket around her child. "I thought you might be angry," I said, "seeking justice." Ruthie finally spoke. "Justice," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "No, this isn't about justice." "Then what is it about?" She looked down at the boy. His tiny hand rested open now, fingers curling gently, as if remembering something they'd already let go of. "Memory," she said. "He was born to carry it." I waited. "Why not speak?" She shook her head. "Speaking invites denial, doubt. A story once told can be twisted, but something born, that can't be undone. This town forgot what it did to my father. My mother died, choking on silence. I came back to finish it. The wind howled outside, rattling the window pane. "I don't want blood," Ruthie said softly. "I want the silence to end. And he," she looked down at the boy, "is louder than any scream." I stepped back, heart pounding, because she wasn't wrong. That baby didn't cry, but his presence, it was thunder. That afternoon, I went straight to the county records office. Most folks wouldn't bother. Furnace Bluff doesn't keep much, but I knew where to look. Tucked in the back, beneath a layer of dust and resignation, was the midwife registry. Every child born within county lines had to be signed off by either a physician, a sheriff, or a church official. The pages until I found it. February 14th. Female patient, Anna Green. Signed by Gerald Brandt. My fingers trembled. The sheriff had been there, not during the birth, but before. His signature sat like a scar across the page, bold and steady. He'd authorized the delivery himself, under a false name. Why? Because he knew. He knew who Ruthie was, knew why she'd come. Maybe he even knew what she was going to do, and he let it happen anyway. I closed the book slowly, mind spinning. Was it guilt, remorse, or something darker? A calculated move to keep it quiet. I thought about going straight to the paper, but then I remembered the Gazette's editor was Brandt's cousin. I remembered how the Rourke murder had disappeared from print 30 years ago, and I remembered Ruthie's voice. The truth doesn't always need a voice, just a witness. I wasn't a reporter. Crossed the street to the sheriff's building. Brandt's horse was tied out front. His rifle was leaning just inside the open door. I didn't go in. I just stood there, staring through the glass at a man behind a desk, perfectly still, something the county ledger. I don't know how long he sat with it, but eventually he looked up and saw me. Our eyes locked through the window. No anger, no panic, just surrender. He stood, closed the book, and turned away. Later that night, the news traveled fast. Sheriff Gerald Brandt resigned. No explanation, no farewell, just a quiet departure under the cover of dusk. Some folks said it was illness, others said retirement, but I knew better. The truth had walked back into town in a cradle, and the man who'd buried it finally heard it cry. The next morning, Furnace Bluff carried on like it always did. The bakery opened, church bells rang, mail was sorted, and gossip passed in whispers. Sheriff Brandt was gone, but no one spoke his name. Not directly, not even the paper mentioned his resignation, just a single line on the last page. Sheriff's seat temporarily vacated. Interim appointment pending. That was it. 30 years of silence wrapped up in one sentence, tucked beneath the Hog Market report. I walked Main Street, watching familiar faces pretend nothing had changed. Old men at the barber shop. Mothers wrangling children in front of the mercantile. I saw Ruthie, too, across the way, wrapped in a shawl, the baby pressed to her chest. She stood in front of the livery, eyes scanning the horizon like she was waiting for something that hadn't yet arrived, or something she'd already sent on its way. I wanted to talk to her again, ask what she planned to do now, if she'd stay. If she'd raise the boy here, but as I stepped into the street, she turned, and was gone, like mist burning off under the sun. That evening, I returned home and sat at the table with the bullet. I hadn't buried it yet. I didn't know why. Maybe part of me wanted someone else to see it, to prove it was real, that all of this had happened. But I knew better. This town would swallow the truth like dry earth swallows rain. I wrapped the slug in Ruthie's berth, cloth, soft, faded linen with faint blue stitching. Then I lifted a floorboard in the corner of my bedroom and placed it there deep in the dark. Beside it, I set a scrap of paper, just one word written on it: remember. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard something outside, not footsteps, rocking slow, rhythmic like a cradle on an old wood floor. And in that moment, I understood Ruthie completely. She hadn't returned to speak. She'd returned to mark the truth, not in ink, not in law, but in flesh. A boy had been born with a bullet in his hand, and the town would either remember or try, once again, to forget. 3 days later, I visited the Rourke Ranch. It's barely standing now, roof sagged, porch warped, weeds up to the windowsills. No one's lived there in decades, not since Silas Rourke was found dead with a hole in his chest, and no one willing to look too hard at who made it. The place had been auctioned twice. Both buyers backed out before signing. They said it was haunted. I brought flowers anyway. Not for ceremony, just for presents. A way to say, someone remembers. I stepped onto the porch, half expecting the wood to collapse under my boots. It creaked, but held. The door was boarded up, but I wasn't there to go inside. I was there to look under. That's where the body had been found, after all, shot once through the heart. No witnesses, no weapon, no noise reported. Just a man sprawled on the floorboards, staring at the stars he'd never see again. I crouched down, brushing away dirt and dead leaves. Then I saw it. A groove, barely visible in the plank. A tiny diagonal cut, charred dark at the edges. A matching groove to the one on the bullet. That's when I realized it wasn't just a signature, it was a seal. A mark made during the murder. Burned into the wood by the heat of the shot, or maybe left by a trembling hand afterward. Either way, it was the same mark Barrow had carved into the slug 30 years ago. The town had never cleaned it, up just built over it, like always. I traced the groove with my finger. It felt warmer than the air dot behind me. The wind kicked up. A creak echoed from the house, not from wind or rot, but a sound I remembered all too well. The rocking dot, I stood slowly, scanning the yard. No one there, no Ruthie, no baby, but I knew they'd been by. Something had been left by the gate. A single scrap of cloth, blue stitching, faded, familiar. The other half of the berth. Cloth I had wrapped around the bullet. No note, just the fabric, waving in the breeze like a flag planted at the edge of a forgotten battlefield, and with it, a truth even heavier than lead. Some wounds aren't meant to heal. They're meant to be seen. The next morning, I found Barrow Cole sitting on the porch of his gunsmith shop, staring out at the sunrise like it had disappointed him. His hands, once steady as chisels, now trembled slightly around a tin mug. I sat beside him without asking, laid the blue-stitched cloth on the table between us. He didn't touch it, just stared. "I went to the Rourke place," I said. He nodded slowly. Was it still there? The groove in the porch? Yes. Barrow. Sighed, I should have burned that place down when I had the chance. I turned to him. "You knew, didn't you?" Back then, he looked at me sideways, and for a moment, I saw the younger man behind the gray. Not a blacksmith, not a neighbor. A man carrying something too heavy for too long. "Gerald came to me," he said quietly. "Night before the shot. Said Silas was threatening to go public about something, about a land deal, I think. Said it'd ruin people, families, reputations. And not just his." He paused. "I thought he meant a fist fight. Maybe some scare tactics, not murder. And you gave him the bullet anyway." Barrow looked at me, shame etched deep. I made the bullet months before. For target shooting, I didn't know it would end up in Silas. But when the news came, I knew it. In my bones, he set the mug down. I melted the molds the next morning. Never sold another slug with that groove again. I pulled the bullet from my coat, the one born in a baby's hand, and set it next to the cloth dot. Barrow stared at it like it might start bleeding. "I thought this would disappear," he whispered. "Like most things do, out here, weather washes the blood away." Grass covers the grave. Time helps us forget. But it didn't, I said. It waited. He closed his eyes. That's the thing about metal. You can bury it, hide it. But it doesn't rot. It remembers. We sat there in silence for a long time. Then he reached over, covered the bullet with the cloth, and whispered, "Let the boy be free of it. Don't let this town put it back in his hand." I nodded, but in my heart, I knew. The town already had. I hadn't stepped into the Furnace Bluff Chapel in years. Not since the funeral of my mother. Not since I watched this town bow its head for appearances. Not truth, but something tugged me there now. Not faith. Memory. The church was empty. Quiet, except for the crackling of old wood in the rafters. Candles still burned near the altar, though no service had been held that week. I took a seat in the back pew, the same pew where Ruthie's mother once sat every Sunday before her voice vanished, before her husband was shot and the town closed its eyes. I held the bullet in my hand again, wrapped now in both halves of the birthcloth. I couldn't leave. It buried. Not yet. There was a whisper behind me, a voice, soft, female, familiar. Truth doesn't stay buried here. It just waits. I turned. No one. But I knew that voice. It belonged to Mary Rourke, Ruthie's mother. I hadn't heard it in 20 years. The town said she died of fever. Ruthie said she died choking on silence. I stood, the hair on my arms prickling, and walked toward the altar. Behind it, carved deep into the wood, nearly lost to shadow and wax drips, was a symbol, a groove, small but unmistakable. Same angle, same cut, the mark on the bullet. I reached out, traced it with my finger. The altar creaked beneath my touch. Then I heard the rocking again, slow, measured, echoing off the chapel walls like a heartbeat with a secret. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just a town that forgot. It was a town that had practiced forgetting. A place where truth was carved into walls, then painted over in holy light, where justice bowed its head to power, and the cradle of a newborn became the loudest sermon ever delivered. I set the wrapped bullet at the base of the altar, beneath the groove, and whispered, "Let this stay. If someone found it, they'd know, and if they didn't, well, the child would grow, and with every breath, he'd remind the town of what it tried so hard to silence, because some truths don't need to shout. They just need to breathe." It was late. Past midnight, when I saw the smoke, thin, gray, curling above the town hall chimney, like a secret climbing toward the stars. I wrapped my shawl tight and followed it through the dark streets of Furnace Bluff, boots crunching on frostbitten dirt. The air smelled like burning paper. The front door of the records office was open. Inside, Sheriff Brandt's desk sat empty drawers half pulled, files stacked in a lopsided heap. A man stood with his back to me, feeding sheets into the stove, slowly, carefully, like he was erasing history by hand. It wasn't Brandt, it was Deputy Langs. I'd known him for years, always quiet, always loyal. He turned when he heard my step. His face went pale. "Ivy," he said, "you shouldn't be here. I didn't move. What are you burning?" His eyes flicked to the stove. Old records, closed cases, Rourke. He didn't answer, just fed another page into the fire. "You think fire will make it right?" I asked. Langs looked down. "The sheriff asked me to. Said he didn't want the boy growing up with it hanging over him. Thought it was better this way." I stepped forward. "That boy doesn't need your protection. He was born with the truth in his hand. He doesn't want silence. He wants to be seen." Lang swallowed hard. "What if people turn on him? Call him cursed?" "They already are," I said. "But he wasn't born cursed. He was born deliberate." I reached into my coat and pulled out the half-burned ledger page I'd saved. The midwife registry entry, the signature, "You can burn every book in this building," I said, holding it up, "but you can't erase what's already living." Lang stared at the paper like it had teeth. Then he stepped back from the stove. "I never wanted any of this," he whispered. I believed him, but it didn't matter. The stove hissed and cracked behind him as the last of the files turned to ash. I left without another word. Some truths burn, others survive, and some, like a bullet born in a newborn's hand, are too heavy to melt. They just wait for the right hand to carry them. Spring came late that year. Snow melted slow, like even the seasons weren't sure they should move forward. The trees bloomed in fits. The river ran redder than usual. Iron from the hills, folks said. I rode out to the edge of Burnt Willow Canyon one last time. Ruthie was packing. The shack looked emptier now, not abandoned, just finished. A cradle sat near the window. Still, rocking gently in the wind, the baby lay bundled on a blanket, staring at the rafters like they held a secret meant only for him. I stood in the doorway. Ruthie didn't turn. "You leaving?" I asked. She nodded. "He's done what he came to." I glanced at the child. "You'll forget this place." "No," she said, "but it won't haunt him. It'll anchor him." Outside, the wind lifted a corner of the cloth I'd seen before, blue stitching, clean and folded. She placed it in a box beside a small wooden carving, the groove mark, etched in with a nail. "He was born remembering," Ruthie said softly. That was enough. We stood in silence for a while. "You know they'll make up stories about him," I said. "Say he was cursed. Say he was touched by something unholy." She smiled, faint but sure. "Let them." Then she picked up her son, kissed his forehead, and whispered something only he could hear. I never asked where she was going. Some part of me knew it didn't matter. The story wasn't hers to carry anymore. It had already taken root by dusk. The shack was empty. The cradle sat still. I rode back into town and found the church doors open again. The altar clean, the bullet gone. Not stolen, got claimed. That night, I wrote everything down, every name, every lie, every silence. And I ended with this. The boy was born holding a bullet, not to fire it, but to finish its echo. In his hand was proof, in his breath was witness, and in his silence was the loudest truth this town has ever known. People still talk about him in hushed tones. The boy with the closed fist, the girl who came back with no voice and left a hole in the sheriff's chair, but me. I just say, he wasn't born cursed, he was born knowing.